Lena Matthews never expected her wedding day to end in a desperate escape through a storm, her once pristine dress torn and muddied. Seeking shelter in a stranger's barn, she finds an unlikely protector in Carter Reed, a reclusive farmer with secrets of his own. But her past isn't far behind. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Lena Matthews ran through the dark woods, her white wedding dress catching on branches and tearing with every desperate step. The rain poured down, soaking through the expensive satin and lace, weighing her down like the commitment she'd just fled. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating her pale face and the fear in her eyes. "I can't go back," she whispered to herself, pushing wet strands of blonde hair from her face. "I won't go back." She could still hear Richard's voice in her head. "You will be my wife," he had said earlier that day, his fingers digging into her arm as he smiled for the wedding planner. "And you will do exactly as I say." Another crack of lightning made her jump. Lena had been running for what felt like hours, ever since she'd slipped out the back of the church while everyone was distracted. Her feet, now bare after abandoning her heels miles back, were cut and bleeding. In the distance, through the sheets of rain, she spotted a light, a farmhouse, and next to it a large red barn. "Thank God," she breathed, gathering what remained of her dress and pushing forward. She didn't care whose property it was. She just needed somewhere to hide. Somewhere to catch her breath and figure out what to do next. The barn door creaked as she pulled it open just enough to slip inside. The smell of hay and animals filled her nostrils, and for the first time in hours she felt safe. Lena collapsed onto a pile of hay in the corner, her body shaking from cold and fear. "Just for tonight," she promised herself as her eyes grew heavy. "Tomorrow I'll figure it all out." Carter Reed woke before sunrise, as he did every morning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, clean smell that he loved. This was why he'd left everything behind 3 years ago. The peace, the simplicity, the honest work. At 35, Carter had walked away from his family's real estate empire in Chicago, much to his father's disgust. He'd used a portion of his trust fund to buy this 200-acre farm in rural Tennessee, telling no one where he was going or why. Here, no one knew him as the heir to the Reed fortune. Here, he was just Carter, the farmer who kept to himself. He pulled on his worn jeans and flannel shirt, running a hand through his dark hair as he glanced out the window at his barn. Something didn't look right. The door was ajar, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. Carter was meticulous about his farm. He never left doors open. "Probably just the wind," he muttered, but grabbed his shotgun from the closet anyway. You couldn't be too careful these days. The morning air was cool as he crossed from the farmhouse to the barn, his boots leaving prints in the mud. He pushed the door open slowly, gun ready, and stepped inside. At first, everything looked normal. His tractor sat where he'd left it. The stalls where he kept 2 horses were closed. The hay was stacked neatly. Then he saw it, or rather her. A woman was curled up in his hay, fast asleep. She was wearing what looked like a wedding dress, though it was hard to tell with all the mud and tears in the fabric. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess around her face, and her bare feet were cut and bruised. Carter lowered his gun, his brow furrowed with confusion. What in the world was a bride doing in his barn? He approached cautiously, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am." Lena's eyes flew open, wide with terror. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the barn wall. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry for trespassing. I just needed somewhere to stay for the night." Carter stared at her, taking in her state. She was clearly running from something or someone. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. "Are you hurt?" he asked, keeping his distance. Lena shook her head. "No." "Well, not really. Just my feet." "You want to tell me why you're wearing a wedding dress in my barn?" She looked down at herself as if just remembering what she was wearing. "It's complicated." Carter sighed, running a hand through his hair. He didn't need complications in his life. That's exactly what he'd left behind in Chicago. "Look," he said finally, "I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, and frankly, I don't want to know. But you can't stay in my barn." Lena's face fell, and she looked so defeated that Carter felt a twinge of guilt. "I'll be gone within the hour," she said, trying to stand. But her legs gave way and she fell back onto the hay with a small cry of pain. Carter cursed under his breath. He couldn't just throw her out, not in her condition. His mother had raised him better than that. "You can stay in the house," he said reluctantly, "just until you're back on your feet. But I have one condition." Lena looked up at him, suspicious. "What?" "Don't tell me why you ran. I don't want to know your story. I don't want to get involved in whatever mess you're running from. Got it?" She nodded slowly. "Got it," Carter set down his gun and approached her, offering his hand. "I'm Carter." She hesitated before taking it. "Lena." "Well, Lena, let's get you cleaned up." The farmhouse was simple but charming, with wooden floors and comfortable, well-worn furniture. It wasn't what Lena had expected. There was a certain elegance to it, despite its simplicity. The kitchen had new appliances, and the bookshelves in the living room were filled with classics and modern bestsellers alike. Bathrooms upstairs. "First door on the right," Carter said, pointing to the staircase. "There should be towels in the cabinet. I'll find you something to wear." Lena nodded gratefully and made her way upstairs, each step painful on her raw feet. The hot water of the shower felt like heaven on her cold skin. She watched as the dirt and bits of leaves washed down the drain, along with the remnants of the life she'd left behind. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink, trying to erase any trace of Richard's touch. When she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, she found a pile of clothes outside the door: a flannel shirt, a pair of sweatpants, with a drawstring, thick socks, and a first aid kit. The clothes were much too big, but they were clean and soft. The socks felt wonderful on her sore feet after she'd treated the cuts with antibiotic ointment from the first aid kit. Downstairs, she found Carter in the kitchen, scrambling eggs at the stove. "Feel better?" he asked without turning around. "Much." "Thank you. Sit down, you need to eat." Lena obeyed, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. She watched him as he worked, noting his strong back and the confident way he moved around the kitchen. He wasn't what she'd expected a farmer to look like. His hands were calloused from work, yes, but there was something about him that seemed out of place. The way he spoke, perhaps, or the expensive watch on his wrist that didn't match his worn clothes. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "you live here alone?" Carter nodded, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "Just me and the animals." "No wife? Girlfriend?" He gave her a look that clearly said he wasn't interested in sharing personal details. "No." Lena took a bite of the eggs. They were perfectly cooked. "You're a good cook. It's eggs, not exactly complicated." "Still, thank you." They ate in silence for a while, Lena stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He was handsome in a rugged way, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a strong jawline covered in stubble. His eyes were the color of the stormy sky, a deep gray blue that seemed to see right through her. "So," Carter said, breaking the silence, "what's your plan?" Lena set down her fork. "I don't know. I didn't exactly think this through." "You have money? Friends you can call?" She shook her head. "I left everything behind, and I can't risk calling anyone. They might—" She stopped herself, remembering his condition. "Let's just say it's not safe." Carter sighed, rinsing his plate in the sink. "Well, you can't stay here indefinitely." "I know, just give me a few days to figure things out. I'll stay out of your way, I promise." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. 3 days. That's all I can offer. After that, you need to move on." Lena nodded, relief washing over her. 3 days was better than nothing. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said, grabbing a jacket from a hook by the door. "If you're staying, you're helping with chores." "Chores? This is a working farm, not a hotel. Everyone pulls their weight here." Lena looked down at her injured feet, then back up at him. "I don't know the first thing about farm work." A ghost of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Then I guess you'll learn." The first day on the farm was the hardest. Despite her injured feet, Carter insisted that Lena help with the simpler tasks. He gave her a pair of his old boots, stuffed with extra socks to make them fit, and put her to work collecting eggs from the chicken coop. "They don't bite," he assured her as she stood nervously at the entrance to the coop. "Much?" Lena shot him a glare before cautiously entering. The hens clucked and shuffled around her, making her jump at every sound. Just reach under them gently, Carter instructed, demonstrating with one of the hens. He made it look so easy, sliding his hand beneath the bird and coming away with a perfect brown egg. Lena tried to copy him, but the hen pecked at her hand, making her yelp and jump back. Carter laughed, a deep, rich sound that Lena realized she hadn't heard before. You have to be confident. They can sense fear. Easy for you to say, she muttered, but tried again, this time moving more decisively. To her surprise, the hen allowed her to reach beneath and retrieve an egg. I did it, she exclaimed, holding up the egg triumphantly. Carter nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. Not bad for a city girl. As the day went on, Lena followed Carter around the farm, learning about his daily routine. He had 2 horses, several chickens, a vegetable garden, and fields of hay that he harvested and sold to neighboring farms. It was a modest operation, but everything was well maintained and organized. By evening, Lena's muscles ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her hands, usually perfectly manicured, were dirty and had the beginnings of blisters. But strangely, she didn't mind. There was something satisfying about the physical work, about accomplishing tangible tasks. After dinner, which Carter cooked, again a simple but delicious stew, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The silence between them was comfortable now, not strained like it had been that morning. Thank you, Lena said quietly. For today, for letting me stay. Carter nodded, his eyes on the horizon. You did good work today. Didn't expect that. Lena laughed softly. Neither did I. She hesitated, then asked, How long have you been farming? 3 years. Do you like it, being alone out here? He was quiet for so long that Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I like the peace. The honesty of it. You put in work, you see results, simple. And before farming, what did you do? Carter turned to her, his expression shuddering. I thought we agreed not to share stories. Lena held up her hands in surrender. Sorry, I was just making conversation. He stood up, stretching. It's been a long day. You should get some rest. Tomorrow won't be any easier. As he walked into the house, Lena remained on the porch, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills. Carter Reed was a mystery, one she found herself increasingly curious about, but she respected his desire for privacy. So after all, she had secrets of her own she wasn't ready to share. In the next 2 days fell into a pattern. Lena would wake up in the guest bedroom, dress in the clothes Carter had lent her. He'd found some old t-shirts that were only slightly too big, and join him for breakfast. Then they would work around the farm until dinner, after which they would sit on the porch or in the living room, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence. Lena learned quickly. By the 3rd day, she could collect eggs without getting pecked, feed the horses without fear, and even help Carter repair a section of fence that had been damaged in the storm. You're not completely useless, he told her as they hammered the last post into place. Coming from him, it felt like high praise. Don't sound so surprised, she shot back, wiping sweat from her brow. I'm tougher than I look. He gave her an appraising glance, beginning to see that. As they walked back to the house, tools in hand, Lena felt a sense of dread settling in her stomach. This was her 3rd day. Tomorrow, according to their agreement, she would have to leave. The thought of going back out into the world, of facing the reality of her situation, filled her with anxiety. Here on Carter's farm, she felt safe, protected. Despite his gruff exterior, he had been kind to her in his own way. What's wrong? Carter asked, noticing her expression. Nothing. Lena forced a smile. Just tired. He didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. After dinner, Lena helped with the dishes, working alongside Carter in a domestic routine that felt surprisingly natural. She found herself stealing glances at him, noting the way his hands moved efficiently, the way his jaw clenched slightly when he was concentrating. Tomorrow's your last day, he said abruptly, breaking the silence. Lena's heart sank. I know. Do you have a plan? She set down the dish she was drying. Not really. I have a friend in Nashville who might help me, but she trailed off, not wanting to explain that contacting anyone from her old life might lead Richard straight to her. Carter was quiet for a moment, then said, "You can stay longer, if you need to." Lena looked up at him in surprise. "Really?" He nodded, not meeting her eyes. "You work hard, I could use the help around here. But what about your rule? No stories, no complications?" Carter shrugged. "Rule still applies. Your past is your business. Just keep it away from my farm." Relief washed over Lena. "Thank you, Carter. I promise I won't be a burden." "See that you aren't," he said, but there was no bite to his words. In fact, if Lena didn't know better, she'd think there was a hint of a smile on his face. Later that night, as Lena lay in bed in the guest room, she found herself thinking about Carter, about the mystery of him. Why would a man like him choose to live alone on a farm, cut off from the world? What was he running from? She had a feeling his story might be as complicated as her own, but for now, she was just grateful for the sanctuary he'd provided, and for the strange, unexpected connection that seemed to be forming between them. Outside her window, the moon cast a silvery light over the farm. In the distance, she could see the barn where she'd first sought refuge. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been only 3 days. For the first time since fleeing her wedding, Lena felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps here, on this quiet farm with this quiet man, she could find a way to start over. Little did she know that back in Atlanta, Richard Evans was already looking for her, and he wasn't a man who gave up easily on what he considered his. The high. Weeks that followed brought an unexpected rhythm to life on the farm. Lena, who had never so much as watered a houseplant before, found herself waking each morning with the sunrise, eager to start the day's work. Her hands, once soft and manicured, now bore calluses she wore with a strange pride. Her skin had tanned under the Tennessee sun, and her muscles had strengthened from the daily chores. But it wasn't just her body that was changing. Something inside her was shifting too, like soil being turned over to reveal richer earth beneath. "You're getting good at this," Carter commented one morning as he watched her confidently lead his chestnut mare, Maple, from the stable to the paddock. The horse followed Lena willingly, without the nervous prancing she'd shown in the early. "Tears," Lena smiled, patting Maple's neck. "She trusts me now. Animals know good people when they meet them," Carter said, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he looked away. It was moments like these that made Lena's heart beat a little faster. The quiet compliments, the lingering glances, the way his hands sometimes brushed against hers when they worked side by side. There was something growing between them, tender and new, like the seedlings in Carter's vegetable garden. Yet they both tiptoed around it, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance they'd established. Carter still didn't ask about her past, and Lena respected his privacy about his own. But sometimes in the evenings when they sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance over the fields, she caught herself wondering who he really was. "I need to go into town for supplies," Carter announced one morning after breakfast. "Want to come along?" Lena hesitated. She hadn't left the farm since arriving nearly a month ago. The thought of being around other people made her nervous. What if someone recognized her? What if news of her escape had spread? "I'll stay here," she said, busying herself with clearing the breakfast dishes. "There's plenty to do around the farm." Carter studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. I'll be back by noon." After he left, Lena took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She was being paranoid. Lebanon, Tennessee was a small town far from Atlanta. What were the chances anyone would know who she was? Still, the fear lingered, a constant shadow over her newfound happiness. She knew she couldn't hide forever. Eventually, her past would catch up with her. To distract herself, Lena threw herself into chores around the farmhouse. She cleaned the kitchen, swept the porch, and decided to tackle the spare bedroom that Carter used as a storage room. He'd mentioned wanting to clear it out, but never having the time. The room was filled with boxes and old furniture, a layer of dust covering everything. Lena opened the windows to let in fresh air and began sorting through the items. Most of it was what she expected: old clothes, farming books, tools. But then she came across a box tucked in the corner that was different from the others. It was made of expensive leather, the kind her father would have in his office for important documents. Curiosity got the better of her. Lena opened it, expecting to find farm deeds or tax papers. Instead, she found photos. Carter in an expensive suit standing in front of a Chicago skyscraper. Carter shaking hands with men in similar suits. A newspaper clipping with the headline, "Reed heir disappears, family fortune in limbo." Lena's hands trembled as she read the article. Carter Reed, son of real estate magnate William Reed, had vanished 3 years ago, shortly after a public disagreement with his father over the direction of the family business. The article speculated about his whereabouts and mentioned a trust fund worth millions. "What are you doing?" Lena jumped, dropping the box. Carter stood in the doorway, his face thunderous, his eyes fixed on the open leather case. I was just cleaning," she stammered. "I didn't mean to pry. Looks exactly like prying to me." His voice was cold, colder than she'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have opened it." Lena stood up, wiping her dusty hands on her jeans. "But Carter, you're rich," he finished for her, his jaw tight. "Or at least I was." "That what you're getting at?" "No, what happened to our agreement?" he demanded. "No stories, remember? No complications?" Lena felt a flash of anger cut through her guilt. "You're right. We agreed not to ask questions, but we never agreed to lie to each other." "I never lied. A lie of omission is still a lie." "Carter?" They stared at each other across the dusty room, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Carter ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Lena had come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I'm Carter Reed. Yes, my family is filthy rich. And yes, I walked away from all of it because I was sick of the lies, the manipulation, the endless power games." He picked up the box, closing it with a snap. "Happy now?" Without waiting for her answer, he turned and left the room, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Lena sank back onto the floor, her heart pounding. Carter was a millionaire in hiding, just as she was a runaway bride in hiding. They were both running from lives that had been chosen for them. No wonder he understood her need for secrecy. Carter avoided her for the rest of the day, busying himself with work in the fields. Lena finished cleaning the spare room, careful not to touch any more of his personal belongings, then prepared dinner as a peace offering. She made a simple pasta dish, one of the few meals she knew how to cook well. As the sauce simmered, she set the table and waited, watching the sun begin to set over the fields. Finally, just as she was about to give up hope, the screen door creaked open and Carter stepped inside. He'd showered, his dark hair still damp, and changed into clean clothes. "Smells good," he said, his voice neutral. Lena took this as a positive sign. "It's almost ready. Just pasta with tomato sauce, nothing fancy." They ate in silence for a while, the tension from earlier still lingering between them. Finally, Lena couldn't stand it anymore. "I really am sorry for snooping," she said. "I wasn't looking for your secrets, I was just curious." Carter set down his fork, his gray-blue eyes meeting hers. "It's fine, I overreacted, it's just, I left that life behind for a reason. I don't like being reminded of it." "Can I ask why? Why you left it all behind?" He was quiet for so long that Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. "My father is a powerful man. He built his empire from nothing, and he expects his son to be just like him. Ruthless, calculating, always putting profit above people." Carter's voice hardened. "I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be the person he wanted me to be." "So you ran," Lena said softly. "Just like me." Carter nodded. "I guess we have that in common. Is that why you let me stay?" "Because you recognized something in me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe, or maybe I just needed help with the chickens." Lena laughed, relieved at the break in tension. "Those chickens are lucky to have me. I've spoiled them rotten." "They're laying more eggs than ever," Carter admitted. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." Their eyes met across the table, and Lena felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. The air between them seemed charged with something new, something that had been building slowly over the past weeks. "Carter," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say, only knowing that something had shifted between them. But before she could continue, a sharp knock at the door broke the moment. They both froze, looking at each other in alarm. "Carter." rarely had visitors, and never this late in the evening. "Stay here," he said, standing up and moving to the door. Lena's heart pounded as she watched him open it, revealing an older man in a sheriff's uniform. "Evening, Carter," the man said, his voice friendly but his eyes curious. "Sorry to disturb you so late." "Sheriff Miller," Carter nodded. "What can I do for you?" "Got a report of a missing person. Thought you might be able to help." The sheriff glanced past Carter, his eyes landing on Lena, who had risen from her chair. "Evening, ma'am." "Hello," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is Lena," Carter said, his tone casual. "She's been helping me around the farm." The sheriff nodded, but Lena could see the questions in his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Lena. Haven't seen you around town." "I'm not much for socializing," Lena replied, forcing a smile. "Sheriff," Carter cut in. "You mentioned a missing person?" "Yes." "Right." Sheriff Miller pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "Got this fax from Atlanta PD. Young woman went missing from her own wedding about a month ago. Family's worried sick." He unfolded the paper, revealing a grainy photo of Lena in her engagement photo, smiling beside Richard. Lena felt her blood run cold. "Name's Lena Matthews," the sheriff continued, oblivious to the effect his words were having. "Fiancé says she might be disoriented, possibly suffering from some kind of breakdown. They just want to make sure she's safe." He looked up at Carter. "Thought I'd ask around, see if anyone's spotted a woman matching her description." Carter's face remained impassive, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. "Can't say that I have, Sheriff, but I'll keep an eye out." Sheriff Miller nodded, refolding the paper. "Appreciate it. If you do see anything, give me a call." He tipped his hat to Lena. "Nice meeting you, miss. You two have a good evening." As soon as the door closed behind the sheriff, Lena collapsed into her chair, her legs no longer able to support her. "He's looking for me," she whispered. "Richard is looking for me." Carter knelt beside her, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Hey, look at me." When she did, his eyes were fierce with determination. "He didn't recognize you. Your hair is different. You're tanned from working outside. You're safe." "For now," Lena said, her voice shaking. "But he won't stop looking. You don't know him, Carter. He'll never stop." Carter was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Why did you run, Lena? What are you so afraid of?" The dam broke. Tears filled Lena's eyes as the words spilled out. "Richard Evans is one of Atlanta's most respected businessmen. Everyone thinks he's perfect, charming, successful, generous. But behind closed doors," she shuddered, "he's controlling, possessive. If I did anything he didn't approve of, he'd get so angry. At first it was just yelling, but then he hurt you," Carter said, his voice dangerously quiet. Lena nodded, wiping away tears. "He was always sorry afterward, always promised it would never happen again. And I believed him because that's what you do when you love someone. Right? You believe them." She laughed bitterly. "But it got worse after we got engaged. He started monitoring my phone, my friends. Said it was because he was worried about me, but it was about control. Always control. So you ran on your wedding day?" "I had to. I overheard him talking to his best man before the ceremony. He said once we were married, he'd finally have me under his thumb for good. That's when I knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't live that life." Carter stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. His face was dark with anger. "He can't find you. I won't let him." "You don't understand. Richard has connections, money, power. If he's involving the police, he'll twist the story to make me look unstable, make himself look like the concerned fiancé." "I understand more than you think," Carter said, his voice hard. "I grew up in that world, remember? I know exactly how men like Richard operate." He ran a hand through his hair. "We need a plan." "I should leave," Lena said, standing up. "It's not fair to drag you into this. You've already done so much for me." "You're not going anywhere," Carter said firmly. "Not alone." "But, Lena." He stepped closer, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You're not alone in this anymore, you understand? We'll figure it out together." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Good," he said, releasing her. First thing tomorrow, we're going to visit an old friend of mine in Nashville, someone who might be able to help. Who? A lawyer. Someone who owes me a favor. Carter's expression was grim. If Richard wants to play dirty, we need to be prepared. That night, Lena lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. The fear of Richard finding her was still there, a dark cloud hovering over her. But now there was something else too. The memory of Carter's face when he'd promised to protect her, the fierce determination in his eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing inside her. She was falling for Carter Reed, the millionaire farmer with secrets of his own, the man who had taken her in without questions, who had given her space to heal, to find herself again, the man who now stood between her and the nightmare she'd fled. In Atlanta, Richard Evans paced his luxurious penthouse office, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His handsome face was twisted with frustration as he listened to the private investigator on the phone. "What do you mean, nothing?" he demanded. "It's been a month. She couldn't have just disappeared." "We've checked all the usual places, sir," the investigator replied. "Friends, family, hotels within a 100-mile radius. We're spreading the net wider, but it takes time." "Time is something I don't have," Richard snapped. "The board meeting is in 2 weeks. I need her found before E. Then, we're doing everything we can, Mr. Evans. The sheriff in Lebanon, Tennessee circulated the photo as you requested, but no hits yet." Richard took a long sip of his whiskey, thinking. He'd chosen Lebanon as one of many small towns to search, because Lena had once mentioned a childhood vacation there. It was a long shot, but he was running out of options. Double the reward, he decided, and tell the sheriff to keep looking. She can't hide forever. As he hung up, Richard walked to the window, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, hinged on finding Lena. Their marriage wasn't just about love, though he did love her in his own way. It was about securing the merger between Evans Enterprises and Matthews Industries. Lena's father had made it clear, no marriage, no merger. And without that merger, Richard's company would face financial ruin. He had kept that part hidden from everyone, maintaining the facade of success while frantically working behind the scenes to keep his empire from crumbling. Lena was the key to everything, and he would find her no matter what it took. "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, sweetheart," he murmured, raising his glass in a mock toast to the city lights below. "I'm coming for you." In the next morning, Lena woke to the sound of rain pattering against her window. The gloomy weather matched her mood as she dressed in jeans and one of Carter's old flannel shirts that she'd taken to wearing. Downstairs, she found Carter already up, a mug of coffee in his hand, staring out at the rain. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Morning," he said. "Sleep okay?" Lena shook her head. "Not really." "Me neither." He pushed a second mug of coffee toward her. "I've been thinking about what to do next. The rain's going to keep us from Nashville today, but I've made some calls. My lawyer friend is looking into Richard's background, seeing what we are dealing with." "What did you tell him?" Lena asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Just the basics. That you're in trouble. That someone's looking for you." "He doesn't. I need to know more than that." Lena nodded, grateful for Carter's discretion. "What do we do in the meantime?" "We act normal. Go about our day like nothing's changed. If the sheriff or anyone else comes around again, you stay out of sight." Carter took a sip of his coffee. "And we get your story straight, in case we need it." They spent the morning going over details of Lena's past, the parts that might matter, if Richard found her. Her family connections, the nature of his business, the people who might help him look for her. It was painful, dredging up memories she'd tried to bury, but Carter listened without judgment, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. "So this merger," he said finally, "it's between your father's company and Richard's, and it hinges on your marriage?" Lena nodded. "My father's old-fashioned that way. He wanted the companies joined by family, not just paperwork. Richard was the perfect son-in-law in his eyes, ambitious, successful, from a good family. And your father doesn't." "To know about how Richard treated you?" "No." Lena looked down at her hands. "I tried to tell my mother once, But she said all men had tempers, that I just needed to be more understanding. She laughed bitterly, as if his temper was my fault. Carter's hands clenched on the table. It wasn't, he said firmly. None of. It was your fault, Lena. She looked up at him, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. I know that now. Being here, away from him, from all of it, it's like I can finally see clearly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, Carter reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I won't let him hurt you again, he said quietly. I promise. The touch of his hand sent warmth through Lena's body. She turned her palm up, their fingers intertwining. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Carter leaned forward slightly, his eyes dropping to her lips. Lena's heart raced as she realized what was about to happen. Then the phone rang, shattering the silence. Carter pulled back, clearing his throat as he stood to answer it. Reed here, he said, his voice gruff. Lena watched his face as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening. When? He asked. How many? Another. Pause. Thanks for the heads up, Pete. I owe you one. He hung up, turning to Lena with urgency in his eyes. That was my neighbor from down the road. Sheriff's on his way back and he's not alone. There's a man with him, someone from out of town in an expensive suit. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Richard, she whispered. Probably. Carter moved quickly, grabbing his jacket. We need to move now. Pack whatever you need. We're leaving. Leaving? But where? I have a cabin, Carter explained, already heading for the stairs. In the mountains, about 2 hours from here. No one knows about it except me. We'll be safe there until we figure out our next move. Lena hurried to her room, her hands shaking as she stuffed clothes into a bag. This was happening too fast. Just yesterday, her biggest worry had been whether Carter returned her feelings. Now they were running for her safety. As she packed, a terrible thought struck her. What if Richard hurt Carter? The idea of Carter suffering because of her made her physically ill. She hurried back downstairs to find Carter loading supplies into a duffel bag. Carter, she said, her voice trembling. Maybe I should just face him, talk to him. If I explain, no. Carter's voice was sharp. Men like Richard don't listen to reason, Lena. They see what they want, and they take it, no matter the cost. He zipped up the bag forcefully. We're sticking together. Before Lena could argue, headlights swept across the windows. A car was coming up the driveway. Too late, Carter muttered. Go upstairs, hide in my closet. Don't come out until I call for you, back in, but go. He pushed her toward the stairs. Trust me, Lena. Please. The desperation in his eyes decided her. Lena nodded, then did something impulsive. She leaned up and pressed her lips to his in a brief, fierce kiss. Be careful, she whispered, then turned and ran up the stairs. Carter stood frozen for a moment, touched his lips where hers had been, then squared his shoulders and moved to the door. Whatever happened next, he would protect Lena. Even if it meant facing the past he'd left behind. Even if it meant becoming Carter Reed, heir to the Reed fortune. One more time. Carter stood on the porch, his face a mask of calm he didn't feel. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, casting a grey haze over the farm. He watched as two men emerged from a sleek black SUV that looked painfully out of place on his muddy driveway. Sheriff Miller stepped out first, his expression uncomfortable, as he adjusted his hat. The second man moved with the smooth confidence of someone used to getting his way. Even from a distance, Carter could see the expensive cut of his suit, the gleam of his Italian shoes, now spattered with Tennessee mud. Richard Evans. It had to be. Carter took a deep breath, centering himself. He'd spent years in boardrooms facing town sharks in suits. He could handle this. Carter, Sheriff Miller called as they approached the porch. Sorry to bother you again. This here is Mr. Evans from Atlanta. He's looking for that missing woman I mentioned yesterday. Richard stepped forward, offering his hand. Up close, Carter could see why Lena might have fallen for him once. He was classically handsome, with a movie star smile and confident blue eyes. But there was something cold in those eyes, something calculating that set Carter's teeth on edge. "Richard Evans," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "Thank you for seeing us, Mr. Reed." Carter shook his hand briefly, noting the too firm grip. A power move. Typical. "Carter's fine," he said. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Richard glanced around the farm, his expression suggesting he found it quaint. "As the sheriff mentioned, I'm looking for my fiancée, Lena Matthews. She disappeared on our wedding day about a month ago. We're all very concerned for her safety." "That's tough," Carter said, keeping his voice neutral, "but I'm not sure how I can help." "May we come in?" Richard asked, already moving toward the door. Carter blocked his path. "I was just heading out to check on my livestock before the next storm hits. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." Richard's smile tightened. "Of course, I understand you're a busy man." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photo. It was Lena, but a version of her Carter barely recognized. Perfectly styled hair, immaculate makeup, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Have you seen her? Perhaps she stopped here asking for work or a place to stay." Carter studied the photo, taking his time. "Can't say that I have. Not many strangers pass through here." Sheriff Miller shifted uncomfortably. "Carter, I noticed. Yesterday you had a young woman staying with you. Blonde, about the right age." Carter's heart pounded, but he kept his expression impassive. "My cousin's daughter, Ellen. She's helping out around the farm for the summer." He turned to Richard. "Sorry I can't be more help." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze moving past Carter to scan the farmhouse windows. "That's a shame. Lena. She's too vulnerable. She's been under a lot of stress lately. The doctors think she might have had some kind of breakdown." "Doctors?" Carter couldn't help asking. "Yes, she'd been seeing a therapist for anxiety." Richard lowered his voice, as if sharing a confidence. "Between us, there were some concerning behaviors, paranoia, delusions. She convinced herself she was in danger." Carter felt a surge of anger but kept it in check. "Sounds serious." "It is. That's why finding her is so important. She needs help. Professional help." Richard reached into his pocket again, this time extracting a business card. "If you do see her or hear anything, please call me directly, day or night." Carter took the card, resisting the urge to tear it up. "Sure thing." Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. "Well, we should let you get back to your chores." "Carter, sorry to bother you." "No bother," Carter replied. Richard lingered, his eyes still scanning the property. "This is quite an operation for one man," he commented. "You must do very well for yourself." There was something in his tone, a hint of suspicion that made Carter tense. "I get by." Richard finally turned to leave, but stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "One more thing, Mr. Reed. If you are harboring Lena, you should know it won't end well. She belongs with people who care about her, who can give her the help she needs." His smile didn't touch his eyes. "I wouldn't want to see anyone else get hurt because of her condition." The threat was clear. Carter stared him down. "I'll keep that in mind." Carter watched them drive away, standing on the porch until the SUV disappeared down the long driveway. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. Inside, he called up the stairs. "Lena, they're gone, it's safe." He heard her footsteps. Then she appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale but composed. "Was it him?" she asked, though they both knew the answer. "Yes." Carter ran a hand through his hair. "We need to go. Now he doesn't believe me and he'll be back." They moved quickly, loading their bags into Carter's old pickup truck. Carter made one last check of the house, making sure everything was secure, then joined Lena in the truck. "Ready?" he asked, seeing the mix of fear and sadness in her eyes as she looked at the farmhouse. "This place was starting to feel like home," she said softly. Carter reached across the seat, taking her hand in his. "We'll come back, I promise." As they drove away from the farm, raindrops began to patter against the windshield again. Lena looked back, watching the red barn grow smaller in the distance, wondering if she'd ever see it again. The drive to Carter's cabin took longer than expected. They avoided main roads, taking winding back routes through the Tennessee countryside. The rain grew heavier, slowing their progress as Carter navigated the increasingly muddy roads. "How much further?" Lena asked as the truck climbed a steep, Forested incline. Outside the windows, tall pines swayed in the wind, and the rain had turned to a fine mist that shrouded everything in grey. "Not far now," Carter replied, his eyes fixed on the narrow road. "Maybe 20 minutes." Lena nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Richard's appearance had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Seeing him again, even from a distance, had brought back all the fear, all the memories. She'd been trying to escape. "You're thinking too loud," Carter said, glancing at her. Despite everything, Lena laughed. "Is that even possible?" "With you?" "Definitely." His expression softened. "Want to talk about it?" Lena sighed. I hate that he found me." "That he's dragged you into this." "He hasn't found you," Carter corrected. "He found my farm, that's all. And as for dragging me into this..." He paused, then said quietly, "I'm exactly where I want to be, Lena." The warmth in his voice made her heart flutter. She looked at him, really looked at him. His strong profile, the determined set of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes that he tried so hard to hide beneath his gruff exterior. In just a month, this man had become more important to her than she could have imagined. "About that kiss," she began, suddenly needing to clear the air. Carter's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You were scared, adrenaline. I get it." "No," Lena said firmly. "That's not why I kissed you." He looked at her then, his grey-blue eyes searching hers. "No?" "No." Lena took a deep breath. "I kissed you because I wanted to, because I've wanted to for weeks now." The truck slowed as Carter pulled to the side of the road. He turned to face her fully, his expression intense. "Lena, you don't have to say anything," she hurried on. "I know this is complicated. I know I'm bringing chaos into your life when you came here for peace. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It's not gratitude or confusion or..." Her words were cut off, as Carter leaned across the seat and captured her lips with his. Unlike her hasty kiss at the farmhouse, this one was deliberate, tender, his hand coming up to cup her cheek as he deepened the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I found you in my barn," he admitted. Lena smiled, her heart soaring despite everything. "Really? Even when I was covered in mud and wearing a torn wedding dress?" "Even then," he chuckled. "You were the most beautiful mess I'd ever seen." They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads touching, sharing the same air. Then Carter sighed, reluctantly pulling away. "We should get moving. Storm's getting worse." He was right. The wind had picked up and the rain was coming down harder now. Carter put the truck in gear and they continued up the mountain. 10 minutes later, the road curved sharply and Carter turned onto an almost invisible dirt track that disappeared into the trees. The truck bounced and jolted as they made their way down the rough path. "Not exactly a five-star resort," Carter warned as they rounded a final bend. What Lena saw took her breath away. Nestled in a small clearing stood a cabin, rustic but charming, with a wide porch and windows that glowed warmly in the stormy light. Behind it, a lake shimmered silver through the trees, its surface rippled by raindrops. "Carter, it's beautiful," she breathed. He looked pleased at her reaction. "It's nothing fancy, just a place I come to when I need to get away from everything." They dashed through the rain to the porch, Carter fumbling with keys as water dripped from his hair. Finally, the door swung open, and they stumbled inside, laughing and breathless. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen along one wall, a door that presumably led to a bedroom. Everything was crafted from rich dark wood that glowed in the dim light. "Let me get a fire going," Carter said, moving to the fireplace. "It gets cold up here, especially in this weather." Lena watched him work, the practiced way he arranged the logs and kindling. Soon, a warm fire was crackling in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "You should change," Carter suggested, nodding at her damp clothes. "The bedroom's through there. I'll make us something hot to drink." Lena nodded gratefully and headed for the bedroom. It was small but cozy, with a large bed covered in what looked like handmade quilts. She changed quickly into dry clothes, using a towel she found in the adjoining bathroom to dry her hair. When she returned to the main room, She found Carter in the kitchen area stirring something on the small stove. He'd changed too into dry jeans and a soft grey sweater that made his eyes look even bluer. "Hot chocolate," he explained, pouring the steaming liquid into 2 mugs. "Not exactly gourmet, but it'll warm you up." They settled on the thick rug in front of the fire, mugs in hand, listening to the rain pattering on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. "So," Lena said after a comfortable silence, "are we going to talk about what happens next?" Carter sighed, setting down his mug. "Richard knows where the farm is now. It's not safe for you there anymore. Here, we have time to figure out a plan." "What kind of plan? I can't run forever, Carter." "No," he agreed, "you can't." He hesitated, then added, "My lawyer friend called while you were changing. He's been looking into Richard." Lena tensed. And it seems your ex-fiancé isn't as squeaky clean as he appears. There have been incidents, women before you, complaints that mysteriously disappeared, and his business is in trouble, serious trouble. He needs that merger with your father's company more than anyone knows." Hope sparked in Lena's chest. "So we have leverage?" "Maybe." Carter's expression was grim. "But men like Richard, when they're backed into a corner, they can be dangerous. We need to be careful." Lena moved closer to him, needing his warmth, his strength. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered. "Tired of letting him control my life, even from a distance." Carter wrapped an arm around her, pulling her against his side. "I know, and we'll end this, I promise. But right now, you're safe here." "We're safe. Let's just be here in this moment." Lena looked up at him at the firelight playing across his features and felt a surge of emotion so intense it almost hurt. Without thinking, she reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "Kiss me again," she whispered. Carter didn't need to be asked twice. His lips found hers, gentle. At first then, with growing passion as she responded to him. His hands tangled in her hair as he deepened the kiss, and Lena melted against him, all thoughts of Richard and danger temporarily forgotten in the heat of Carter's embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "Lena," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever we face with Richard, I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this, with you, all the way." Tears pricked at Lena's eyes. How long had she waited to hear words like that from someone who actually meant them? "I believe you," she whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere either." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin, wrapped in Carter's arms in front of the fire, Lena felt a peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time since fleeing her wedding, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future free from fear. A future with Carter. The morning dawned clear and bright, the storm of the previous day leaving the forest around the cabin washed clean and gleaming. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She stretched lazily, remembering the night before, how they had talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories and dreams, exchanging increasingly heated kisses until finally, exhausted, they had retreated to the bedroom. Carter had held her all night, her head on his chest, his arms secure around her. She had never slept so well. Pulling on one of Carter's flannel shirts over her t-shirt and pajama shorts, Lena padded barefoot into the main room. Carter stood at the stove, his back to her, making what smelled like pancakes. "Good morning," she said, her voice still husky from sleep. He turned, and the smile that lit up his face made her heart skip. "Morning, sleepyhead." Lena moved to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his back. "Smells good. Hope you like blueberry pancakes. It's about all I can make up here." "I love blueberry pancakes." They ate breakfast at the small kitchen table, the easy domesticity of it all making Lena's chest ache with longing. This could be their life. Simple meals, quiet mornings, the comfort of being together. No Richard, no fear, no running. "What are you thinking about?" Carter asked, noticing her expression. "How nice this is," she admitted. "Being here with you, how right it feels." Carter reached across the table, taking her hand. "It does feel right, doesn't it?" After breakfast, Carter took her on a tour of the property. The cabin stood on 5 secluded acres, bordered on one side by a small lake and on the others by dense forest. A narrow trail led down to the water, where a simple wooden dock stretched out over the shallows. My grandfather used to bring me fishing here when I was a kid, Carter explained as they stood on the dock, the sun warm on their faces. This place was his escape too. When he died, he left it to me, not to the family trust. My father doesn't even know it exists. It's perfect, Lena said, leaning against his side. Thank you for sharing it with me. They spent the day exploring the woods around the cabin, Carter pointing out various plants and wildlife. For a few precious hours, they managed to forget the reason they were there, laughing and talking like any new couple discovering each other. As evening approached, they returned to the cabin, flushed from the fresh air and exercise. Carter built another fire while Lena prepared a simple dinner from the supplies they'd brought. I spoke to my lawyer again while you were showering, Carter said, as they sat down to eat. He's been digging deeper into Richard's business situation. It's worse than we thought, Lena set down her fork. How bad? Bad enough that if this merger with your father's company doesn't go through, he'll likely face bankruptcy, possibly even criminal charges for some questionable financial practices. So that's why he's so desperate to find me, Lena said. Realization dawning. It's not about me at all, it's about saving his skin. Carter nodded. Seems that way, which makes him even more dangerous. A man like that with everything to lose. He didn't need to finish the thought. What do? We gather evidence, Carter said, his expression determined. Every shady deal, every covered-up complaint. We build a case so strong that he'll back off just to keep it from going public. And if he doesn't, then we go public ourselves. I still have contacts in the business world, people who owe me favors. Once word gets out about what kind of man Richard Evans really is, no one will do business with him. Lena felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For so long, she had felt powerless against Richard, trapped by his influence and connections. But with Carter by her side, fighting for her, she finally saw a way out. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for believing me, for helping me. Carter moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair. Lena, he said, taking her hands in his, I'm not just helping you because it's the right thing to do. I'm helping you because... He paused, seeming to struggle for words. Because I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been since that first day in the barn. Lena's breath caught. Carter! You don't have to say anything, he hurried on. I know it's fast. I know you're still dealing with everything that happened with Richard, but I needed you to know how I feel. Lena reached out, cradling his face in her hands. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. When I ran from my wedding, I never imagined I'd find someone like you. Someone who sees me, really sees me. Carter's eyes shone with emotion as he leaned in to kiss her. A kiss full of promise and hope. Lena wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, pouring all her feelings into the embrace. Later, much later, they lay tangled together in the large bed, the moonlight streaming through the window, casting silver patterns on their skin. Lena traced the lines of Carter's chest with her fingertips, marveling at the sense of peace she felt. I was so afraid, she admitted. For so long. I thought I'd always be looking over my shoulder, always running. Carter caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. Not anymore. We end this together and then we start fresh, wherever you want. The farm, Lena said without hesitation. I love it there. It feels like home. Carter smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The farm it is. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, dreams of a shared future filling their minds. Outside, the forest was quiet, peaceful, offering a sanctuary from the storm they knew was coming. Richard Evans paced the floor of his hotel room in Lebanon, his patience wearing thin. It had been 2 days since he'd visited Reed's farm and still no sign of Lena or the farmer. The private investigator he'd hired sat uncomfortably in a chair by the window, watching Richard's agitated movements. Sir, if I may, he ventured. We've confirmed that Reed is not at his farm. Neighbors say he often disappears for days at a time. Could be hunting, fishing, or hiding my fiancée, Richard snapped. I want to know everything about this Carter Reed. Background, finances, Properties, known associates, everything. The investigator nodded, making notes. I've already started digging. He's a bit of a mystery, this guy. Moved here 3 years ago, keeps to himself. Pays for everything in cash. Cash? Richard paused in his pacing. That's unusual for a farmer. Yes, sir. And there's something else. I ran his name through some databases. Nothing came up at first, but then I expanded the search. The investigator leaned forward. There was a Carter Reed in Chicago, son of William Reed, the real estate magnate. Richard's eyes widened. William Reed? His son disappeared a few years ago. There was a scandal, something about him rejecting the family business. Exactly. And the timing matches when our Carter Reed showed up in Tennessee. A slow smile spread across Richard's face. So our simple farmer is actually a runaway millionaire. Interesting. He resumed his pacing, mind working quickly. If he's hiding Lena, they must be somewhere nearby. A man like that used to luxury. He wouldn't rough it. He'd have a comfortable backup plan. Like what, sir? A second property. Somewhere secluded. Private. Richard turned to the investigator. Find out if Reed owns any other properties in the area. Cabins, lake houses, anything that might not be in his name. Check under William Reed as well, or any other family members. The investigator nodded, already typing on his laptop. On it, sir. Richard moved to the window, looking out at the small town of Lebanon. He was close, he could feel it. Lena was out there somewhere, hiding with this farmer. The thought of her with another man made his blood boil. I'll find you, Lena, he muttered, his reflection in the glass wearing a cold smile. And when I do, you'll wish you'd never run. The next morning, Carter woke early, careful not to disturb Lena as he slipped out of bed. He made coffee and stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air as he mentally reviewed their situation. His lawyer friend had promised to have a complete file on Richard's business dealings by the end of the day. With that evidence in hand, they could potentially force Richard to back off. But Carter wasn't naive enough to think it would be that simple. Men like Richard didn't give up easily, especially when their empire was at stake. His phone buzzed in his pocket. One of the few modern conveniences the cabin had, thanks to a signal booster he'd installed. It was a text from his neighbor, Pete. Stranger asking questions about you in town. Expensive suit, flash car. Said he was an old friend from Chicago. Carter's blood ran cold. Richard was getting closer. Just then, Lena appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, wearing one of his shirts. The sight of her momentarily distracted him from his worry. Hey, she said, coming to stand beside him. Everything okay? Carter hesitated, not wanting to ruin the peace they'd found. But he had promised honesty. Richard's asking questions in town, about me specifically. Pete just texted to warn me. Lena's face paled. How could he know? About your past, I mean. He's a businessman. He knows how to dig for information. Carter wrapped an arm around her shoulders. But it's going to be okay. The cabin's not registered in my name. It's still in my grandfather's trust. He won't find us here. Lena leaned into him, seeking comfort. I hate this. I hate that he's still controlling our lives, even from a distance. Not for much longer, Carter promised. Once we have the evidence. His phone buzzed again, and Carter felt a chill as he read the message from his lawyer. Evans is desperate. Heard he's hiring local muscle. Watch your back. He showed the message to Lena, whose eyes widened with fear. He's going to hurt you, she whispered. Because of me. He's going to try, Carter corrected grimly. But I'm not that easy to hurt. Still, a sense of urgency filled him. They needed to move fast now, get ahead of Richard before he could close in. I need to make some calls, Carter said. Try to speed things up with the evidence gathering. Stay inside, okay? Don't go wandering in the woods. Lena nodded, her earlier happiness now shadowed by worry. Carter spent the morning on the phone, speaking in hushed tones with various contacts from his past life. Lena tried to keep busy, cleaning the already tidy cabin, preparing lunch they were too anxious to eat. By mid-afternoon, Carter's expression had lightened somewhat. Good news, he told Lena, as he ended his last call. My lawyer found a smoking gun. evidence of Richard bribing officials to cover up complaints from 2 former assistants who accused him of assault. It's enough to destroy him if it goes public. So, we have leverage, Lena said, hope rising in her voice. We do. I'm having the documents sent to a secure email account. Once we have them, we can contact Richard, make it clear that he backs off or we go public. For the first time in days, Lena allowed herself to believe that this nightmare might actually end. She threw her arms around Carter's neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Carter held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "We're going to get through this, Lena, together." As evening approached, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the lake. Despite the lingering threat of Richard, there was a new sense of optimism between them, a feeling that they had turned a corner. "When this is over," Carter said, his arm around Lena as they sat on the porch swing, "what do you want to do? Besides going back to the farm, Lena considered the question. "I never really thought about it. With Richard, my whole future was planned out. The perfect politician's wife, hosting dinner parties, smiling for cameras." She shuddered at the memory. "I think I'd like to work with animals. Maybe start a shelter on the farm." Carter smiled, kissing the top of her head. "I like that idea. We've got plenty of land for it." The casual way he included her in his future made Lena's heart swell. "What about you? Do you ever miss your old life? The excitement of the business world?" Carter was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I miss the challenge of it," he admitted. "The strategic thinking, the negotiations, but I don't miss the person I was becoming. Cold, calculating, just like my father." He looked down at her. "The farm brought me back to myself. And now you've given me something I never thought I'd have." "What's that?" "Someone to share it with," he said simply. "Someone who sees the real me, not the Reed fortune or the family name." Lena reached up, touching his face tenderly. "I love you, Carter Reed. The farmer, the millionaire, all of you." Turned his face to kiss her palm. "And I love you, Lena Matthews, the runaway bride who turned my world upside down." Their lips had just met in a tender kiss when a twig snapped in the forest edge. Carter pulled away, instantly alert, his body tensing. "What is it?" Lena whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. "Probably just a deer," Carter said, but his eyes scanned the tree line warily. "Let's go inside." They had just reached the door when a voice called out from the gathering darkness, a voice that made Lena freeze in terror. "Hello, sweetheart. Miss me?" Richard Evans stepped out from the trees, a gun in his hand and a cold smile on his face. Behind him, 2 burly men emerged from the shadows. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Richard asked, his voice deceptively gentle. "Did you really think I'd let you go?" Carter pushed Lena behind him, shielding her with his body. "How did you find us?" he demanded. Richard chuckled. "You're not the only one with resources, Mr. Reed, or should I say heir to the Reed fortune. Your grandfather's property records weren't that hard to find once I knew where to look." Lena felt Carter, tense, his hand reaching for the door handle. He was trying to get her inside, away from danger. "Let her go, Evans," Carter said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at them. "It's over. We have evidence of everything. The bribes, the cover-ups, the financial fraud. One call from me, and it all goes public." Richard's smile faltered. Slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Bluffing won't save you." "It's not a bluff. My lawyer has a file ready to send to the SEC, the police, and every major news outlet. If anything happens to us, he's instructed to release it immediately." For a moment, uncertainty flickered in Richard's eyes. Then his face hardened. "Nice try. But I know a desperate man when I see one." He gestured with the gun. "Now, Lena is coming with me. You can make this easy or you can make it messy, your choice." Lena clutched Carter's arm, her whole body trembling. This couldn't be happening. Not when they were so close to freedom. Carter's voice was like ice when he spoke again. "She's not going anywhere with you. Ever." Richard's face contorted with rage. "She's mine," he snarled. "She's always been mine." He raised the gun, aiming it directly at Carter's chest. "Last chance, farm boy. Step aside." In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Lena saw Carter's body tense, preparing to move. She saw Richard's finger tightening on the trigger. And she knew with sudden clarity that she couldn't let Carter die for her. "Stop," she cried, stepping out from behind Carter. "Richard, please, don't hurt him." "Lena, no." Carter grabbed for her, but she evaded his grasp. "If I come with you," Lena said to Richard, her voice shaking but determined, "do you promise not to hurt him?" A triumphant smile spread across Richard's face. "Of course, sweetheart. I just want you home where you belong." "Don't do this," Carter pleaded. "Lena, we can fight him together." Lena turned to Carter, tears streaming down her face. "I can't let him hurt you. I can't live with that." Before Carter could respond, one of Richard's men moved forward, grabbing Lena's arm roughly. "Let's go, lady. Boss wants to get moving." "No," Carter lunged forward, but Richard stepped between them, the gun now pressed against Carter's chest. "Back off," Richard warned, "or I'll shoot you right here, evidence or no evidence." The second man grabbed Carter, forcing him to his knees on the porch. Lena struggled against her captor, reaching out for Carter. "I love you," she cried as the man dragged her toward a waiting SUV at the edge of the clearing. "Carter, I love you." "This is touching, really," Richard said, looking down at Carter with contempt. "But Lena and I have a wedding to plan. Again." He leaned closer. "You know what's funny? If you just stayed in your little farm, playing the simple life, none of this would have happened. But you had to play hero." Carter looked up at him, his eyes burning with rage. "This isn't over, Evans," Richard laughed. "I think it is." He stepped back, lowering the gun slightly. "Goodbye, Mr. Reed. Thank you for taking such good care of my fiancée." As Richard turned to follow his men, who were now forcing a struggling Lena into the SUV, Carter made his move. With a roar of fury, he broke free from his captor, lunging. For Richard, the sound of a gunshot echoed through the clearing, followed by Lena's agonized scream. "Carter!" The gunshot echoed through the clearing, seeming to hang in the air for an eternity. Lena's scream tore from her throat as she watched Carter fall backward onto the porch. "No," she cried, fighting with renewed strength against the man holding her. "Carter!" Richard stood over Carter's fallen form, the gun still smoking in his hand. His face showed no remorse, only cold calculation. "Get her in the car," he ordered his men. "Now." Lena kicked and scratched, desperate to reach Carter, but the men were too strong. Through her tears, she could see Carter lying motionless on the porch, blood spreading across his shirt. "You killed him!" she screamed at Richard. "You monster!" Richard grabbed her chin roughly. "Shut up! He's not dead, yet. Just wounded. Whether he stays that way depends on you, sweetheart." Lena went still, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "What do you mean?" "You come with me quietly. Do exactly as I say, and I'll send help for him once we're safely away. Fight me, and I'll have my men finish what I started." His eyes were cold, empty of anything resembling humanity. "Your choice." Lena looked back at Carter, her heart breaking. He was alive, but for how long without medical attention? She couldn't let him die. Not for her. "Fine," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "I'll go with you. Just please, call an ambulance for him." Richard smiled, that charming public smile that had once fooled her. "That's my good girl." He turned to one of his men. "Once we're 20 minutes out, call 911. Tell them there's been a hunting accident." The man nodded, and Lena was bundled into the SUV. As they drove away from the cabin, she pressed her hand against the window, watching Carter's still form on the porch until the trees obscured her view. "Don't die," she whispered. "Please don't die." Beside her, Richard placed a possessive hand on her knee. "Forget about him, Lena. You're coming home where you belong. We have a wedding to plan." Lena turned to him, not bothering to hide her hatred. "I will never marry you, never." Richard's face hardened. "Yes, you will, because if you don't, I'll find your farmer friend and finish what I started. And this time, I won't miss the heart." The threat hung in the air between them as the SUV wound its way down the mountain road. Lena turned away, staring out the window at the passing trees, her mind racing. She had to find a way out. Not just for herself now, but for Carter too. Consciousness returned to Carter in waves of searing pain. He opened his eyes to bright lights and the sterile smell of a hospital room. For a moment, he couldn't remember what had happened. Then it all came flooding back. Richard, the gun, Lena's screams. Lena. He tried to sit up, but white-hot pain shot through his shoulder, forcing him back down. Easy there, son. A nurse appeared at his side, gently pushing him back against the pillows. You've been shot. The bullet went clean through your shoulder. You're lucky it missed anything vital. How long? Carter managed, his throat dry. How long have I been here? About 12 hours. You lost a lot of blood, but you're going to be fine. The nurse checked his IV. There's a sheriff waiting to talk. To you, been here all night, feel up to it? Carter nodded. He needed to find out if anyone was looking for Lena. Sheriff Miller entered the room, hat in hand, his face grave. Good to see you awake, Carter. Had us worried. Sheriff, Carter acknowledged. Did you find her? Did you find Lena? The sheriff frowned. We found no one else at the cabin, just you bleeding on the porch. Want to tell me what happened? Carter hesitated. If he told the truth, would the sheriff believe him? Or would he believe Richard's story about Lena being mentally unstable? Carter, Sheriff Miller sat in the chair beside the bed. I know you lied to me before. That woman staying with you wasn't your cousin's daughter. It was Lena Matthews, wasn't it, the missing bride from Atlanta? Seeing no point in further deception, Carter nodded. Yes, she came to my farm the night of her wedding. She was running from her fiancé, Richard Evans. He's abusive, controlling. She was terrified of him. And yesterday, he found us. Tracked. Us to my grandfather's cabin somehow. He had men with him. When I tried to stop them from taking Lena, he shot me. Carter's hand fisted in the hospital sheet. He has her, Sheriff, and he'll hurt her if we don't find her. Sheriff Miller's expression was troubled. That's a serious accusation against a well-respected businessman, Carter. It's the truth, and I can prove it. Carter struggled to sit up. My phone. Where's my phone? The sheriff retrieved Carter's belongings from a drawer, handing him his phone. Carter's fingers shook as he accessed his email, finding the message from his lawyer. Here, evidence of Richard's crimes. Bribes, cover-ups, assault complaints from former employees. And there's more. His business is failing. He needs to marry Lena to secure a merger with her father's company. Sheriff Miller took the phone, scrolling through the documents with a deepening frown. This is substantial, but it's your word against his about what happened at the cabin. Check his gun, Carter insisted. It will match the bullet you pulled out of me. And there were witnesses, his men. One of them called 911, claimed it was a hunting accident. The sheriff handed back the phone. I'll make some calls, see what we can find out. He stood, replacing his hat. In the meantime, you focus on getting better. You're no help to Lena. Laid up in here. After the sheriff left, Carter lay back against the pillows, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to get out of the hospital, to go after Lena himself. But he knew the sheriff was right. He was in no condition to help her yet. Instead, he picked up his phone again, scrolling to a number he hadn't used in years. It was time to call in the one resource he'd sworn never to use again, the Reed family name. Lena sat in Richard's Atlanta penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. She'd been back for 3 days, a virtual prisoner in the luxurious apartment. Richard had taken her phone, limited her movements, and kept her under constant watch. Just until you come to your senses, he'd explained with that cold smile. Until you remember who you really are. She'd learned from the news that Carter was alive, recovering in a Tennessee hospital. The relief had nearly brought her to her knees. But she still had no way to contact him, no way to let him know she was thinking of him, praying for him. The sound of the front door opening made her tense. Richard was back. There you are. His voice was jovial, as if they were a normal couple. Still enjoying the view? Lena didn't answer, didn't turn to look at him. Richard sighed dramatically. Still giving me the silent treatment? That's fine. We have more important things to discuss. He moved to the bar, pouring himself a drink. Your father called today. He's anxious about rescheduling the wedding. I was thinking 2 weeks from Saturday. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, given the circumstances. Lena finally turned to face him. I told you I won't marry you. And I told you what would happen if you refused. Richard's voice hardened. Your farmer boyfriend is out of the hospital now. Be a shame if he had another accident. Fear clutched at Lena's heart. You wouldn't. Try me. Richard sipped his drink. Besides, what exactly do you think you're going back to? A life of poverty on a small farm, collecting eggs and milking cows? He laughed. That's not who you are, Lena. You were born for this life, our life. You don't know who I am, Lena said quietly. You never did. I know you better than you know yourself. Richard set down his glass, moving toward her. This little rebellion is just that, little. Deep down you know where you belong. Lena backed away from him until she hit the window. If that were true, you wouldn't need to threaten me. Something dangerous flashed in Richard's eyes. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in painfully. I've been patient, Lena, understanding even, but my patience is running out. Mr. Evans? A voice from the hallway interrupted them. Richard's assistant stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Richard released Lena's arm, smoothing his tie. Tell them I'm busy. Take a message. He's quite insistent, sir. Says it's about the Matthews merger. Richard's expression changed. Fine, I'll be right there. He turned to Lena, his voice low. Stay here. We're not finished. After he left, Lena rubbed her arm where his fingers had left marks. She had to. Get out of here, but how? Richard kept the elevator locked with a key code, and there were always men watching the stairwell. She moved to the door of the penthouse, cracking it open slightly to listen to the conversation in the outer office. I don't care who you are. Richard's voice was tense. The deal with Matthews is none of your business. On the contrary. The second voice was familiar, but Lena couldn't place it. When one of my oldest friends calls me about his daughter being held against her will, it becomes very much my business. Your friend is mistaken. Lena is here of her own free will. She's unwell, suffering from delusions. Save it, Evans. William Reed doesn't appreciate being lied to. Lena's breath caught. William Reed, Carter's father? Reed. Richard's voice had changed, become uncertain. I don't understand what the Reed family has to do with any of this. My son seems to think you're a threat to someone he cares about. And while Carter and I have had our differences, we agree on one thing: we protect our own. Lena's heart soared. Carter had called his father. He'd reached out to the family he'd left behind for her. This is absurd, Richard was saying. Your son attacked me. I acted in self-defense. That's not what the witnesses say, not what the evidence says. William Reed's voice was ice-cold. My lawyers have been quite busy the past few days. Would you like to know what they found? There was a long silence. Lena held her breath, straining to hear. What do you want? Richard finally asked, his voice tight. It's simple. You're going to release Lena Matthews today. You're going to drop all charges against my son. You're going to leave them both alone, permanently. And if I refuse, then by this time tomorrow, every business associate you have will receive a very detailed file about your creative accounting practices. The SEC will receive the same, as will the Atlanta PD, with special attention to those assault complaints you thought had disappeared. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. They had Richard cornered. You're bluffing, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me. The Reed family has been in business a lot longer than you have, son. We didn't get where we are by bluffing. Another long silence followed. Lena could almost feel Richard's panic from where she stood. Fine, he finally said. Take her, but this isn't over. I think it is. For your sake, I hope it is. Because if you come near either of them again, what happens next won't be handled with lawyers and paperwork. Understand? The sound of footsteps made Lena dash back to the window, pretending she hadn't heard anything. The door opened and Richard entered, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Pack your things, he said, not looking at her. You're leaving. Lena's heart leapt. And what? Why? Don't play innocent. Your boyfriend's daddy is here to collect you. Richard's voice was bitter. Congratulations, Lena. You traded up from one rich man to an even richer one. Before Lena could respond, an older man appeared in the doorway. The family resemblance to Carter was unmistakable. The same strong jaw, the same grey-blue eyes, though this man's were harder, more calculating. Ms. Matthews, William Reed said with a slight nod. I'm William, Reed Carter's father. If you're ready, there's a car waiting downstairs. Lena looked between the two men, hardly daring to believe this was happening. I don't have much to pack, she said. Just what Richard bought me since I've been back. Leave. It? William suggested. Start fresh. Richard stood by the bar, his knuckles white around his glass. This isn't over, he repeated, his eyes fixed on Lena. Yes, it is, she said firmly. Goodbye, Richard. I won't be seeing you again. As she followed William Reed out of the penthouse, Lena felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she was truly free. In the elevator, she turned to the older man. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I don't know how to repay you. William Reed studied her for a moment. Do you love my son, Ms. Matthews? The directness of the question caught her off guard, but she answered without hesitation. Yes, very much. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then make him happy. That's repayment enough. Carter paced the length of his hospital room, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. It had been 3 days since he'd called his father, asking for the one thing he'd sworn never to ask for, help from the Reed family. He still couldn't quite believe he'd done it. 3 years of no contact, of building a life completely separate from the Reed name and fortune, undone with a single phone call. But for Lena, he'd have done far more. His father had been surprisingly receptive. After the initial shock of hearing from his estranged son, William Reed had listened to Carter's story without interruption. So you need the Reed family resources, he'd said when Carter finished, after walking away from them 3 years ago. Yes, Carter had admitted. I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. There had been a long pause, then, she must be quite a woman. She is. Then I'll help you, son. Not because of the Reed name or fortune, but because you asked. Because you're my son, regardless of our differences. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled Carter from his thoughts. He turned toward the door, expecting the nurse with his next round of pain medication. Instead, Lena stood in the doorway. Carter, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Lena? For a moment he thought he was hallucinating. Then she ran to him, and her arms around him were very real, her tears wet against his neck as she clung to him. You're here, he murmured, into her hair. You're really here. Your father, she explained, pulling back to look at him. He came to Atlanta. He got me away from Richard. Carter shook his head in wonder. I can't believe he actually did it. He did more than that. Lena's eyes shone with unshed tears. He made Richard back down completely, threatened to expose everything if he ever came near either of us again. Relief flooded through Carter. It was over. Truly over. He cradled Lena's face in his hands, drinking in the sight of her. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine. Lena leaned into his touch. I was so scared for you. When he shot you, I thought, it takes more than a bullet to keep me away from you, Carter said, trying to lighten the mood. Lena laughed through her tears. Don't joke about that. I've never been so terrified in my life. Carter pulled her close again, mindful of his injured shoulder. It's over now. We're safe. Both of us. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, reassuring themselves that they were both really there, really safe. Finally, Lena pulled back. Your father's waiting outside. He wanted to give us some time alone first. Carter tensed, slightly. I should talk to him. Yes, you should. Lena's expression was serious. He loves you, Carter. Whatever happened between you, he still loves you. Carter nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Lena pressed a gentle kiss to his lips, then stepped back. I'll send him in. A moment later, William Reed entered the room. The two men stared at each other, 3 years of silence stretching between them. Father, Carter finally said. Son. William moved further into the room. You look different. Farm life will do that. William nodded, glancing around the hospital room. The doctor says you'll make a full recovery. Yes. Another silence fell. Then William said, She's lovely. You're Lena. I can see why you called me. Thank you, Carter said, for helping. Her, for understanding. William moved to the window, looking out at the small town of Lebanon. I didn't understand, not at first. When you left Chicago, walked away from everything we'd built." He turned back to Carter. "I was angry, hurt. I thought you were rejecting me, not just the business." "I wasn't," Carter said quietly. "I was saving myself. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. Someone cold and calculating like me," William finished. "Yes, I know, and maybe you were right to leave. But I've missed you, son. More than you know." The simple admission broke something open in Carter's chest. "I've missed you too, Dad." William cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "Well then, perhaps we can start again. Not in business. I understand that life isn't for you, but as family." Carter nodded, a weight he'd carried for 3 years finally lifting. "I'd like that." 6 months later, the farm looked its best, bathed in the golden light of a late summer afternoon. The barn had been freshly painted, the fields were lush with hay ready for harvest, and wildflowers dotted the meadow behind the farmhouse. In that meadow, beneath an arch woven with local flowers, Carter Reed waited for his bride. The ceremony was small, just as they wanted. A few friends from town, including Sheriff Miller and his wife, Carter's father and mother, their relationship cautiously mending after years of strain. Lena's mother, who had finally left her controlling husband after seeing the happiness her daughter had found. Carter adjusted his tie nervously. He'd foregone a formal suit in favor of clean jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a simple blue tie that matched his eyes. Farm wedding, farm clothes. That had been their agreement. The small gathering of guests turned as music began to play. Not the traditional wedding march, but a simple acoustic guitar piece that suited the setting perfectly. And then she was there, walking toward him through the wildflowers. Lena wore a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, a crown of daisies on her head. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers and herbs from their garden. She was the most beautiful thing Carter had ever seen. When she reached him, taking his hands in hers, Carter felt a sense of rightness that went bone deep. This was where they belonged, together. "Dearly beloved," the local minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Carter Reed and Lena Matthews." The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. They exchanged simple gold bands and vows they had written themselves. "Lena," Carter said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes, "I found you in my barn on the darkest night of the year, and you brought light back into my life. You taught me that running away isn't the same as finding peace. True peace is what we've built together, here on this farm in the life we share. I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by you every day for the rest of our lives." Lena blinked back tears as she spoke her vows. "Carter, you took me in when I had nowhere else to go. You gave me sanctuary, not just in your home, but in your heart. You showed me what real love looks like, patient, kind, supportive. I promise to love you wholly and completely, to be your partner in all things, and to never take for granted the precious gift we've found in each other. By the power vested in me," the minister concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Carter pulled Lena into his arms, kissing her with all the love in his heart as their guests applauded. When they broke apart, both were laughing, joy radiating from them like sunlight. The reception was held in the barn, transformed with strings of lights and tables laden with homemade food prepared by friends from town. They danced under the stars, ate pie instead of wedding cake, and celebrated with the simple, honest joy that had become the hallmark of their life together. Later, as the party wound down, Carter found Lena standing on the porch of the farmhouse, looking out at their land bathed in moonlight. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," she said, leaning back against him. "It's perfect, all of it." Carter kissed her temple. "There is one wedding gift I haven't given you yet." Lena turned in his arms, curious. "Oh?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out an envelope. "This came yesterday. I wanted to wait until we were officially married." Lena opened the envelope, scanning the legal document inside. Her eyes widened. "Carter, this is approval for an animal shelter, with funding. From the Reed Family Foundation," Carter explained. Dad's idea, actually. The land behind the north pasture is perfect for it. You said you wanted to work with animals, give them a second chance. Like you gave me, Lena whispered, tears in her eyes. Like we gave each other, Carter corrected gently. Lena threw her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply. I love you. Carter Reed, farmer, millionaire, my husband. And I love you, Lena Reed. Runaway bride, farm girl, my wife. Carter scooped her up in his arms, carrying her toward the farmhouse door. Now, Mrs. Reed, what do you say we start our honeymoon? Lena laughed, the sound bright in the night air. I thought you'd never ask. As Carter carried his bride over the threshold of their home, both knew they had found something rare and precious. Not just love, but a true partnership, a life built on honesty, trust, and the quiet joy of simply being together. From the darkness of a stormy night and a desperate escape had come the brightest of beginnings. And as they closed the door on the world outside, they stepped into the future they had fought so hard to claim, a future filled with love, laughter, and the peaceful rhythm of life on their farm, the place where a runaway bride had found refuge in a millionaire's barn, and they had both found home in each other's hearts. The end.